Okay, before we get going, we have one special announcement from Patricia Graybo out of Livingston, Montana.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You'll see in front of you there's an invitation, and that is on September 6th. We have a bronze of Warren McGee. And those of you who don't know Warren, he took about 40,000 pictures of railroad trains. He began his advocacy for rail passenger service in 1979 right away. So he had about 40 years of his life advocating for rail passenger service. And he passed on about 5 years ago at 102. So we have at our museum in Montana, we have a section that is Warren McGee. Well, this is so exciting for us because we worked really hard to have a bronze of Warren McGee. And it's going to be at the Depot Center, and we're uncovering the bronze on September 6th. So if you know of someone or you would like to come, we want to spread the word as far as we can that we have this wonderful unveiling going on. Quickly, that was when Warren was 4 years old. He escaped from being tied to his mother's clothesline rope, took his little wagon, and came down to the Depot Center in Livingston. And a train went by, and that is the moment at which he fell in love with trains. So the bronze has him sitting on a bench at the Depot Center looking out at trains. And behind him, you'll see in this picture, is a 4-year-old with a wagon looking around the corner. So it's the universal experience I think you've all felt of falling in love with trains. So I just want to be sure that we invite you to our grand opening of Warren McGee's statue. By the way, the last time Mary Michaels had another bronze she did, she's sort of our Frederick Remington. It went on all U-Haul trucks around the United States. So maybe we'll have a rail passenger advocate on the U-Haul trucks across the United States, because it's the only statue I know of a railroad conductor in this country. So please show up on September 6th at Livingston. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And before we get rolling on this next panel, I just want to make sure everyone has the chance to meet the Assistant Secretary of Transportation for Tribal Affairs, Orlando Teller. Welcome, Orlando. Orlando will be our keynote speaker tonight at the Payne Native American Center. So I'm delighted to hand the mic over to my friend and colleague, Jason Stuart. Jason is a city councilman in Glendive, Montana, and he's also the vice chairman of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority, and I'll let him introduce his panel. Jason.
Thank you, Dave. Well, as Dave said, my name is Jason Stewart, and I represent Dawson County in far eastern Montana on the BSPRA, and also have served as vice chair of BSPRA since its inception. So just to introduce the rest of our panel here today, right here we have Martin Charlo. Martin represents the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Nation. And next to him we have Diane Magone. Diane is our director from Mineral County. Next to her we have Luella Bryan, who we're just now getting to know. She is the new appointee from the Crow Nation, so welcome, Luella. And another new appointee is our new director from Rosebud County, Samantha Beyl. So we welcome all of them to the panel today. So the name of our panel today that we're up here to talk about is Engaging Rural and Tribal Communities in Revitalizing Passenger Rail Service and some of the lessons we've learned through that. You know, I'm going to make a few remarks here before we get going in earnest here. Some things that's been kind of running through my mind this morning is listening to some of the other speakers, and some things have been talked about. And people who know me know I'm a historian by academic training and somewhat by trade. I've taught history at Dawson Community College for the last 8.5 years. And I'm going to preface what I'm about to say by saying I do not say this as an endorsement or condemnation of anybody's political viewpoint or anything. But you hear a lot in the country today about, quote unquote, making America great again, right? About some idea of hearkening back to some earlier time, or this perceived as being better. Now, I'm going to make the argument real quick that I think America's still pretty dang great, right? That we are still, as President Ronald Reagan said, quoting John Winthrop, one of the founders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, that America is a shining city on a hill that is still a beacon of light and hope and opportunity to the billions of people around the world who live in crushing poverty and under the boot of authoritarian regimes. But instead of arguing what that phrase might mean, I'm going to say, when people say that, what time period do you think they're talking about? Like what moment in American history do they think they're hearkening back to? Is it July 4th, 1776? It's a pretty good day for America, right? With apologies to Danielle back there, not the greatest day for the British Empire. Or is it 1789 when the Constitution was finally ratified and came into effect? Was it the day in April 1865 when Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant and ended the bloody national nightmare that was the Civil War? Or was it later that year in December of 1865 when the 13th Amendment was passed, finally and forever abolishing the practice of slavery in this country? What day are we talking about? Well, what I think most people actually think about when they think about that day, I think the image in most people's minds, who remembers what was yesterday? D-Day, the 80th anniversary of D-Day, right? And not just D-Day. I mean, we commemorated D-Day yesterday, but that period in American history, right, where for several of us, it was our grandfathers. For some of you, it was your fathers. For some of you in this room, it was your great-grandfathers who went off and, not just for the sake of our country, but for the sake of all mankind, fought against the most evil tyranny that had ever that ever despoiled the face of the earth and defeated it. And how did, here's the point I'm trying to get to here. Every GI, every piece of artillery, every box of M1 Garand rifles, every round of ammunition, how did it get to the ports to get overseas? By rail, right? And so I say all that to say, when most people are saying that, I think that really is the image they have in their mind, right? Well, where are we today? Could we accomplish that today with our current rail system? Probably not, right? We've had decades of neglect, of underinvestment. Some might even call it mismanagement in some respects. But it's, we're obviously not as robust in our rail system then as we are today. So, that's an important moment in our history, and I think something we can hearken back to. I also was struck by something our friend from Northwestern Energy said earlier, where he said, back east, I had to write this down, this is a way of life, meaning rail, but out west, it's not. Now, again, being a historian, there's a lot of historical irony there, because the railroad is what built the West as we know it today, right? Without it, the West as we know it today would not exist. Now, I do have to make a comment here because we have our tribal representatives here. There's a dark legacy to that, right? Because the railroad also helped destroy their way of life and forced them onto the reservations. The railroad was a big part of that, and we have to acknowledge that dark legacy of that. But we're now come back full circle to 21st century, where now we're talking about how the railroad, how passenger rail can help reinvigorate rural and tribal communities, can help these communities grow and thrive and succeed, improve their quality of life, improve their connectivity to the rest of the country and to the rest of the state and region. Many of these communities are very geographically and or socially isolated, right? I've told everybody here, right, it's 563 miles from Glendive to Missoula. And there's only one way you can get there, to drive. And so for all of our communities that we represent here, we are out there on the kind of the ragged edge, right? We don't have the best transportation connections to connect us to the things that our citizens need. that would help our communities better thrive and grow. Things like healthcare, access to healthcare, access to higher education, access to economic opportunities, access to leisure, to just being able to get out and go to, take the train to Chicago to go see the Cubs play in Wrigley, or, go to Bismarck to visit our family during the holidays when chances are the roads are covered in 6 inches of snow or more. So for rural and tribal communities, this effort really has a chance to, I believe, revitalize our communities even more so than it can the cities. I'm not naming names here, but we've heard over the last 3 years, some elected officials refer to passenger rail service as a quote-unquote urban liberal thing. But I don't think anything could be farther from the truth, because I truly believe that it is the rural and tribal communities like Glendive, like Forsyth, like the CSKT, like the Crow, who stand to benefit the most and see the most opportunity open up for them as a result of getting these trains back. So I've taken up too much time already here. So real quick, I'm going to tell a couple of anecdotes from that came out of our meetings last year with the Montana Healthcare Foundation. And, we held these meetings to kind of talk about healthcare and access to healthcare, but there were a lot of other things that kind of bubbled up to the surface during that. I'm going to tell 2 little quick anecdotes, and I'm going to turn it over to my panelists here to talk about why this is important to their communities. And again, all this is about telling a story and how we can engage other communities up and down the 2,300 miles of the former North Coast Hiawatha route, as well as along other potential routes, to get them to talking about their stories about why this would be important to them and how it would benefit them. So the first thing I'm going to mention is at our event in Glendive, we had an elderly couple. They were probably in their mid-70s, and they came out for that meeting. And they described how the gentleman had to go to Billings for knee surgery. Now, full disclosure, Glendive does have essential air service, has twice daily flights to and from Billings, but the plane really wasn't an option for them. The plane is small, it's cramped, uncomfortable for folks suffering from that kind of debilitating injury, and they just, they weren't going to do that. So they drove. It was winter. They get to Billings, they get his knee surgery completed, and then a blizzard hits. And they were stuck in Billings for 3 days. And this is an elderly couple on a fixed income, and then they're stuck paying for 3 nights of hotel room that they did not expect to pay for. And their comment to us was like, boy, if only there had been a train, and we could have avoided all that and just gotten back home and spent a lot less money than 3 nights in a hotel room in Billings. So that's one example of, just a concrete example of how folks can benefit from this. Another one I'm going to bring up is from Jess and I attended the meeting in Lame Deer for the Northern Cheyenne, and this is something I had never thought of. Not being a tribal person, it was something that would have never occurred to me, and I think Jess was kind of blown away by this too. They talked about how in the tribal communities, your extended family is not your extended family, right? Families are tight-knit. They're close. So your aunts, your uncles, your first and second cousins, they are as close to you as your mom and dad and siblings, right? And when a tribal member gets ill and they need to go outside for health care, there being limited health care opportunities in most cases on the reservations, and they need to go to Denver or Seattle or Minneapolis or wherever to have health care service performed on them, the whole family wants to go with them, right? They want to support their loved one. They want to be there for them while they go through that. But the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, will only pay for one family member to go. And many of the people on the reservation there on the North Cheyenne, they explained too that many of them have no access to a operable vehicle. And the idea of flying is they can't possibly afford it. It's well beyond their reach. And so that was one thing they brought up is, boy, if we had a train, if we had access to a train, then more of our family members could go with their family member to receive their health care and be with them and be together in the way that they would like to be. So those are just two examples I want to throw out from the meetings that came out last year. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to discuss some of the things that have come out their communities. And I don't have any preference here. Who wants to go first? Thank you, Diane.
Can you hear me? Is this working? Okay. First of all, I just want to say, this is off the subject, but it ties in with what Jason was saying. My dad was in England on D-Day, and he just died a couple of years ago. He was almost 100 years old. So yesterday was a special, heartfelt day to me, too. My name is Diane Magone. I'm the Monroe County Director. Sanders County is right close to us, and I just want to say that when Dan Bucks, who wrote the grant to the Montana Healthcare Foundation, announced that we had been awarded the grant, I was the first one, I think, to call him and say, Paradise, Paradise. And Paradise is actually in Sanders County, just north to us. But it was a real railroad town, hardly a wide spot in the road now. But that's one of the rural communities, I think the first one that we decided upon. And so I was tasked with I was the person that helped set up the meeting, and I am also proud to say that we had 40 participants. I was a little bit anxious. Ashley was the coordinator of the discussion, and as people introduced themselves, every one of them had a train story. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is just going to derail the whole thing. And as it was perfect. It was a great lead-in to what Ashley was saying. Everybody broke down into groups, and the engagement was incredible. There was one person from Superior there who was kind of saying, nay, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work from the beginning. And he came with his wife, and his wife told me afterwards that it had changed his mind, the whole process. I don't really have any one story. I mean, they all have various stories about traveling to school, traveling, as we know, if you go from Superior or Paradise, Superior, into Missoula, you hit, depending on which way it ends up going, but Bozeman and Billings, which are our big universities, two of our big universities in the state. Also, in Missoula, the healthcare professionals seem to travel back and forth between Billings. And my own doctor, when I had surgery, came from Billings, or else the patients have to go to Billings. Now, if people have that train to take, or if the doctor had that train, it's so much more convenient. I mean, you've got time. You don't have to worry about bad roads, all of the above. So, lastly, I would like to also point out that if you're a Class C school, for football, basketball games, whatnot, the opportunity to use the train, the schools are kind of few and far between in Montana, so you do a lot of traveling. So the train would really be convenient for that, again, to have that. And I do remember the days when the train ran through Superior. I think in 1978 or 79 was when it shut down, the passenger train. And I think we all want to see that come back. People are gradually becoming more interested in what we're doing. George Bailey, who you heard earlier, works with the St. Regis Resort people, and he wants to bring a meeting similar to what we did across the state, courtesy of the Montana Healthcare Foundation grant, to St. Regis to educate people, to bring people together, and to sell the railroad, Passenger Rail Authority.
Thank you, Diane. Luella.
Hello, my name is Luella Bryn. I am the tourism manager for the Crow Nation Office of Tourism. I also am the executive director of 4 Points Media, independent news source that covers the Crow Indian Reservation. I also used to teach journalism at Lodgegrass High School, so I do a little bit of everything. One of the things that I'll pivot from my colleague here is sports. The Crow people love basketball, if you haven't noticed, if you haven't heard on the grapevine. And one of the things that came out of our discussion last summer was traveling for tournaments, traveling for districts, divisionals, state tournaments, was using the train to do that because sometimes we have to go as far as Missoula to get to a track tournament or a track meet, basketball tournaments, Great Falls, Bozeman, Missoula, and that would increase our attendance at those tournaments, which would increase revenue for those schools hosting those tournaments. Another interesting thing that came out of the meeting was access to health care. We do have our IHS clinic on the reservation, but most of the specialists are contracted out to clinics and hospitals in Billings. And we are a maternal health desert on the reservation, an area of 2.2 million acres. Can anybody guess how many female health, like OBs, gynecologists we have in that area to serve our community? 2. We have 1 midwife and 1 OB who's not allowed to touch patients, like physically not allowed to touch patients. He lost his privileges. So most of our patients will have to go into Billings because there's no OBs in Hardin either. I know 3 women who had their babies on I-90 going into Billings for labor and delivery in their cars, not in the ambulance, in their cars. So they could have it on a train, I guess, but it might be cleaner. But they would have better access to maternal health if they had access to trains. We'd have better access for like knee surgeries, PT, and stuff like that if we had access to the train. Another thing that came out of our meeting was just simple things like grocery shopping. The cost of 10 pounds of hamburger at our local grocery store was up to $25 or $30 last summer. If we had a train, it'd be much cheaper to go to Billings to save that money with the cost of inflation. Some people don't have the vehicle to go into Billings to do that. And those Winco prices look pretty good. But if you don't have the car, you can't do that. Some of the things that people discussed, mostly me discussed, because I live on the train tracks. I've always lived on the train tracks. I can't sleep unless I live on the train tracks, right? What would happen to the level of traffic on the tracks? How are we going to mitigate the level of traffic on the tracks, and how does that change when we live by a switch station? Like I do, I live by a switch station. I came home one night and waited 30 minutes to get across my track. How are we going to kind of secure those areas? Are we going to have arms that come down with lights and the ding, 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 ding? Or is it just going to be the stop sign? Those are those kinds of safety questions were asked, because we did have an incident on the reservation where someone did lose their life at a crossing, and they ended up putting the arms in that intersection, but only in that intersection, and there's several down the old 87 area on Highway 87. So people were worried about that, but most of the discussion that we had in Gary Owen was positive. People thinking about shopping, people thinking about vacationing, people thinking about going to visit different areas that they normally wouldn't go and think about going to, you mean I could go to Seattle? You mean I could go to Chicago? You mean I could go into Bismarck for the weekend just to do it? And like those kinds of eye-opening comments were interesting, because we're so limited with not having reliable transportation. And that's not to say everyone on the reservation doesn't have reliable transportation, but a large majority of people don't have reliable transportation. Like me, I have a car that breaks down all the time that I literally just bought. So it's it's difficult for a lot of people to have future plans to do something fun, where some people can just get up and go and do that. Another discussion that we did have was about tourism and the area between Mount Rushmore and Yellowstone Park, and how that area gets a lot of tourism, and there are actually tour routes that make that circle between Mount Rushmore, Little Bighorn, Yellowstone Park, and then they loop back around Devil's Tower. And, you know, how can that benefit? How can we benefit from maybe having a train kind of feed into that loop? If someone hops off the train, gets on a bus, loops back around, and then gets back on the train and continues their journey. And how do we develop that as part of our tourism industry? So those are all of the many discussions that we had in the short amount of time that we had.
Thank you, Luella. Sam or Martin?
I'll talk. So the topic of healthcare has come up. One of the things for me is safety, not only for our drivers with our harsh winter conditions, but our emergency services personnel who have to go dig them out when they have their accidents and put their lives at risk. But what I'd really like to talk about is expand on the tourism, because I think that is huge. Last year, there was $5.45 billion spent from non-residents in tourism in our state. 1.65 billion of that for transportation. And we have so many places that are so beautiful, you can't see them. It was also mentioned earlier today, the conversations and the time spent with father and son riding the train. You have that opportunity to build upon those relationships and, you know, share special memories with your kids. We've had a lot of that talked about too. So I would like to see it for that. I think that's a big thing, and bring the economy to our small towns.
Thank you, Sam. Martin, looks like you're last.
Exactly what I wanted, because I have about 2 minutes left, so thank you for taking a lot of time. I think a lot's been said. These chairs are really uncomfortable, so stand. They look cool, I guess. But. So Jason kind of touched on, Pesia. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Martin Charlo. I'm the Pablo representative for the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes. Our reservation starts at about Evero on 93 and goes up halfway up Flathead Lake. We're somewhat of a rural community, but we have a lot of tourism traffic that comes through our area. It started a lot during the allotment time and the homesteading, so a lot of tourists came in and never left. So if you are a tourist here, we welcome you to our homeland, but please feel free to go home when you're done and enjoying our area. You know, with our tribal communities, you know, we are one of the largest, or we are the largest group of people that served in the military, and so we have a lot of veterans that don't have services to you know, a lot of the VA services that are across the state. Thankfully, we have one in Missoula now, which is a great facility. But before that, we were traveling, you know, across the state, or you know, to Helena or even to Spokane to get those services for our people. And it's something that, you know, we really take those people for, you know, hold them in the highest regard. And so services for them are always important. You know, the other thing is our families extend across states, and so, you know, visiting family, intermarried to different reservations across Montana or across Northwest is really kind of critical to do that during the winter times. A lot of our ceremonies are during the winter, and so that kind of travel would always be good. You know, looking kind of forward, the rail will run right through the southern part of our reservation, and it's something that, you know, our tribes use rail to get to D.C. to negotiate our treaties or fight against some of the discrepancies in our treaties. And so it's really something that, you know, we've been engaged in, good or bad, for, you know, hundreds of years. And looking forward to the future, we want to leave this better than it was before. And so a lot of the auto traffic that goes up and down 93 if we could alleviate any of that, that'd be great. We have a spur that goes up from Dixon to Polson, and that'd be a good way to have some of our less affluent people who don't have vehicles, who are homeless, that a lot of our tribal services are in Pablo, Montana, which is about a 40-minute drive for some of the people on the southern side of our community. And it's something that we really, are working on right now is the people that are struggling with mental health. And, that's a big part of the healthcare system now, is mental health, and then intertwining with that with addiction. And that's, across the board, across America, that's a big issue right now. And so travel to treatment centers that are in Spokane or, in different areas is critical for us right now. And, to have someone drive a patient over there in the middle of the winter versus putting them on a train and maybe, riding that was a lot safer than, the former. So, I appreciate the time. I'm taking 3 minutes of the next person's, but I hope you guys all come to the reception this evening. We have some great drummers and dancers coming down for kind of the showpiece. This area is our, we'll talk more about that, but this is our homeland here. This is, there are pictures of our camps in this area, and most of the cities, the train rails, the highways used our trails and our campsites to settle because we knew where the best places were to live. And so if you want to go back to when America was great, that's when America was great for me. So.
That was a fantastic close, Martin. Way to round that out, circle back. All right, I guess we can maybe take a minute or two. If we're not, Dave, we okay? Take a couple of questions. Anybody has any? Two questions. All right, we've been given time for 2 questions. Anybody out there have a question for any of our panelists here? Wow, looks like we're getting off easy, guys.
We got one.
Oh, we got one.
Oh, we might have 2. Here we go, Dave.
Please give people a sense about how bad the weather gets and that the roads really don't work, even an interstate highway. Please give people who are not from here, this region, a sense of that, about how bad the weather gets.
Well, yeah, I'll take a stab at this and then let anybody else who wants to talk. Basically, from anytime from late October until, well, like last week, you are at pretty high risk of not being able to get where you want to go. I've actually had this happen to me a few years ago when my day job is with Dawson County Economic Development Council, and it was during a legislative session, and we were trying to get a new water line, a potable water line, put into Makoshka State Park so we can get a new campground built there. And I was planning to come out to the legislature to go before a committee and lobby on behalf of that water line, ask for funding for it. Well, the morning I was going to leave, it snowed a foot all the way from here, from Glendive to Helena. I obviously went nowhere, right, because I wasn't about to try to drive the 420 miles that it is from Glendive to Helena. And put that in perspective, 420 miles. That's how far it is from Glendive to Helena. And that's for somebody from eastern Montana, where you're from Glendive or Forsyth or Hardin, the only way you can get to our state capital is to what? Drive, right? And for 5 months out of the year at least, it's at least a 50-50 chance you're not going to be able to make that drive. And when are our legislative sessions? During the winter, right? And again, harkening back to the past, right? Well, in the past, did that matter so much? Because how did the past legislators get to the session? They rode the train, right? They didn't drive. They rode the train from eastern Montana, from the tribal communities to Helena to get there. So the weather is a huge factor. If you're going east to North Dakota and being in eastern Montana, and Sam probably the same way in Forsyth, and probably for maybe some for Luella too, a lot of family connections, a lot of business connections across the border in North Dakota. That interstate, the North Dakota border during the winter is shut down like 6 days out of 7. Like you can't drive on it. I mean, last winter was horrible. This interstate was always closed. So if you have family, if you have business and, trying to get somewhere during the winter, it's miserable, okay, especially for those of us in far eastern Montana that don't have much access to airports and flights. Our really only way to get around is by car, and a lot of times that is just not safe or even possible. So a train would go a long way towards alleviating that and making the quality of life in our communities so much better, and making our communities more attractive for new residents, for new businesses. Because right now, they look at it and they're like, well, do I want to live in a place or open my business in a place where 5 months out of the year, I'm basically cut off from the rest of the world?
So I think the answer was roads are bad in Montana.
Well, let me give you an example. I worked in Ashland, but every weekend I would go back home to Crow. It's an hour away. A snowstorm's hit, and for 4 hours I was driving, and I was still an hour away. Because every 10 miles I had to slow down 10 miles per hour. So I was an hour away, and then I had to go 65 miles an hour, and I was 65 miles away. Then I had to go 55 miles an hour when I was 55 miles away. Then I had to go 45 miles an hour when I was 45 miles away. And so for 3 hours, I was an hour away. And I had to ride the rumble strips the entire time because you couldn't see the road at all.
Thanks, Luella. And Rob, thank you for MDT's Herculean efforts to still do winter maintenance here in the state of Montana on our roads. So, nonetheless, one last question.
Yep. This one's for Martin. Quick question. What do you have, like, as far as, like, a vision of a good railroad, passenger rail idea from Missoula to Polson, if any? I'm completely, supportive of something going from Missoula north to Flathead. I'm just wondering what you think would be a good idea.
I know we're over time, so real quick, that line has done a lot for us. We actually brought restored the bison to Montana back on that line, and so it only goes up to Polson, and so that lies some issues. From Missoula to Polson, there's a lot of healthcare options. If we could do a passenger rail, a couple times a day, I don't know what the logistics of. We are still in discussions with the rail owner over the ownership of it, because if you abandon a spur line, it should revert back to the original owner, and we feel we are that. So some issues on that spur still, but we're looking at those. COVID put a kind of a damper on that. I know we shouldn't use COVID as an excuse anymore, but that's the reality. And so, we have a lot of successful corporations that could definitely take a look at that and maybe provide some, an entertainment train or something along those lines that could be a benefit for, the tourists in our area that want to go up to the lake, and then we can shuttle you guys to wherever you want, and then shuttle you back to the train to get back and go home. So thank you.
Thank you, Earl. Thank you, Martin. Assistant Secretary Teller.
Yeah, thank you, David. And thank you for the tribal members that are here, and also for the county folks that are here. And Sago. What we're talking about is really important. And from the most part of the conversation, I hear all concepts of potentialities and accessibilities to goods movement, healthcare, and economic development. And I do support this opportunity with Big Sky. I think it's a potential for the rest of the United States to follow. At the same time, community-based transportation planning is really critical. And so in Indian country, that community-based transportation planning starts from the house, and then it goes throughout the community, right? And everyone gets involved, either yes, no. And the conversations that Luella and Martin brought up, as well as Sam and Diane, when it comes to the accessibility conversation, is really key. So when you and the partners here that are talking about expanding this corridor, And I think Luella brought up a really good conversation about safety and rail safety crossing, and the fact that sometimes a train sits on a rail where the exits are at. And that is a concern that I have for your communities. If you don't mind, share with me the continued dialogue with community-based transportation planning from your communities back home back in the lodge, back in council, back at your chairman's office. What does that look like when it comes to making sure that we have all of the communities, their dialogue from rural communities, the counties, the state, and of course FRA and Big Sky? Thank you.
We have a pretty robust transportation system that is that. It's from the homes to appointments to court to whatever need be. We've adopted a software that's similar to kind of a Uber style on-demand type ridership. Before they were just, you would have to call and schedule 24 hours before, and a lot of times that just doesn't happen. If you don't have food in your house and you need a ride to the food bank and they're closing or something, you need to get there. And so that is something that we've worked well with Department of Transportation on getting grants, extending our fleet. But, a lot of our, and we also run a line from Missoula to Kalispell daily. And so, the transportation is definitely something that we take into consideration. Rail, we feel also would be, environmentally friendly as well. So just getting any of these cars off the road that don't need to be on there. So thank you for the question.
I'm in the tourism department, therefore not privy to transportation's discussions or the chairman's discussions, but I do know that the transportation department has fixed routes for the transit system, and we do have small, I think 12-seater charter buses that are driven by CDL certified chauffeur endorsed drivers that go into Billings there and back in the morning and there and back in the evening. They go into the different communities in the morning and in the evenings. And then there's a special transit bus for on-demand for disabled people. And then our health department has the medical transportation for people who need to go to appointments in Billings. That is not where it needs to be. And I believe it's grant funded right now. So they only have the 2 vans. And it's not serving as many people as it needs to serve, but it's limited by its funding.
Thank you, Luella. And that will have to be the last word. Let's give our panel another round of applause. Thank you. So what we are going to do now, folks, is we are going to conduct the quickest formal board meeting in the history of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. So if any of you want to watch and see how the sausage is made during one of our board meetings, now is your opportunity for the next 15 minutes. I will not be offended if you want to take a break and step out, but by no means do you have to. All the board members should have a packet. If you are a member of our board of directors and do not have a packet, raise your hand and we will get one to you. Okay, we have one up here. Okay, and before we get going with the formal portion of our board meeting, you also get to witness us swearing in a new board member. So, George, you want to come up? Come on up here. All right. It is a rarity that in such an esteemed group of folks, we get to swear someone into office. So, George is our new director from Bighorn County. So, George, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, George Reelbird, do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Montana, and that I will discharge the duties of my office, Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority Director, with fidelity, so help me God. Congratulations. And we even have a notary here to take care of the business. Okay. Thanks, George. Okay, we are going to just dive right into this. Are we ready to go over there, Maggie?
Hello, everybody. I'm Maggie with the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. I'm the Office Services Manager, so we are going to get started here.
Okay, let us get started. So, folks, you might probably have gathered that the state of Montana is a big state, over 600 miles across. So this is the only time during the year, during our annual meeting, when we actually get together physically in person as a board. All the other times we are staring at each other through computer screens, doing our meetings virtually. So welcome to our June 7th meeting of the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. And I would like to call to order today's meeting. And Maggie, if you would be so kind as to call the roll for us.
Certainly, Dave. All right, I will be calling roll in alphabetical order by county. So Bighorn County, George Reelbird, as we saw, is in attendance. Broadwater County, Daryl Folkbird. Butte-Silverbow County, Dan Olson. Carbon County, Scott Miller did let us know he won't be in attendance today. Custer County, Kevin Krause also let us know that he will not be in attendance today. Dawson County, Jason Stuart. Gallatin County, Scott McFarland also let us know that he will not be in attendance today. Granite County, Elena Gagliano. Jefferson County, Mary Hensley. Lake County, Steve Stanley let us know that he would not be able to be present today. Mineral County, Diane Magone. Missoula County, Dave Strohmeyer.
Here.
Park County, Grant Granger did let us know that he would not be in attendance today. Powell County, Terry Jennings also let us know that he would not be in attendance today. Rosebud County, Sam Beyl. Sanders County, Rich Wallace. Here. Stillwater County, Tyrell Hamilton. Treasure County, Ruth Baker let us know that she would not be in attendance today. And Webo County, Edward Anderson. All right, moving on to our ex officio members. Confederate Salesian Kootenai Tribes, Martin Charlo. Amtrak, Chase Kitchen. BNSF Railway, Jim Tylick did let us know he would have to leave early today. Northern Cheyenne, Norma Gono, also marked absent as won't be here today. Montana Department of Transportation, Rob Stapley.
And we also have Crow, Luella.
Yep, and Luella, Crow Tribe, Luella Bryan.
How many is that?
With that, that makes 10 board members and three ex officio members.
Okay, that is barely a quorum. So we have a quorum. Are there any, before we move on, is there any public comment on items not on today's agenda, either online or here in the room? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. We have minutes to approve from May 8th. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes? Seeing none, they will stand approved as presented. We are doing an extremely abbreviated agenda today, so we've dropped all of our committee reports with the exception of finance. And Rich, would you like to give just a brief synopsis financial-wise and also talk about our budget for FY24 and the schedule?
Yes, I'll be real quick. You can look through your financial package in the interest of time, but we continue to be in a steady state financial position and good financial position as we continue to move forward. The voluntary contribution letters went out to all the counties, and that's an important part of the fiscal 25 budget. And we ask for your support as directors to work with your commissioners. Many of you are commissioners so that makes it a little easier. But we're continuing to move forward. We're probably about halfway through our budget steps, but the hard part, the heavy lifting, starts in about 30 to 45 days when we start developing our first budget draft. Anyone, last call, if you have any expenses that we did not incur in 24 that you foresee in 25 that need to be budgeted, please get that to me by next Wednesday or Thursday, as I'm going to be working with Vivian Winston, and we're going to be developing the fiscal year 25 budget. And we'll talk more about that during the engagement session this afternoon before we leave.
All right. Thank you, Rich. Any questions for Rich related to finance? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. We have no unfinished business today. We have one bit of new business, and this relates to our public entity liability insurance renewal. Jess, would you like to say a few words about this?
Yeah, and I am learning, and just to give just a little bit of a overview of just what it's like to staff the authority, and Dave has been very patient with us. Kyla knows this from her role, and it's a difference between a nonprofit and a government entity. So we're constantly learning every single thing, if it deals with an expenditure, needs to be approved. So even on this one here, we just need approval. My understanding, Maggie, and did we get clarification? We just need approval to send in our application for insurance, and then they'll come back with that number. I'd make a really bad joke about some of you making our liability go higher, but that would really probably fall short here on a Friday afternoon, sunny after lunch, and a lot of presentations. So what we're going to do here and ask the board to vote on, and this is where it always gets interesting because we talked about sausage making, just us saying we are going to enter into a financial contractual obligation. We need that approval. And then my understanding, Mr. Chairman, is we'll take it back to the board when we get that number. So here today, we're just asking for your approval to use and abuse either my signature or Dave's on the insurance application that will then go back to it. I'll share a little side note, and of course Jim's here and all the great work that we were about to bother you because we couldn't get insurance with getting coverage for BSPRA, and of course insurance providers, when this was right about the time last year after Ohio, and so they said, wait, you're a transportation authority? We're not going to insure a railroad in your trains. No, we're just the authority staffing the function they're in. So it was a very unique route to even walk down the insurance side of things, saying that we're not going to be actually insuring the passenger rail in the car. So that being noted, we have those pieces. It's in front of you. It's in your packet, and we'll ask for a motion for us to finalize our application.
Okay, we have a motion from, Mr. Dan Olson over there. Is there a second? Diane Magone. Is there any further discussion on the motion or public comment on the motion to authorize me, the chair, to submit our application for liability insurance? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that carries. We will get that signed and hopefully remain insured. Okay, very good. We have no correspondence. Are there any general comments from board members today? Okay, seeing none, we have no other unscheduled matters. Our next meeting of the board will be virtually on July 10th, and one of the main items at that meeting will be the FY25 budget. Anything else to come before the board today? Okay, good job, everyone. We will be adjourned as the board of directors. We will reconvene in July. We meet every other month with the exception of this month. This was a special meeting since we are all assembled. Sometimes life gets in the way of other things, and I was just notified by my wife that my daughter had her wisdom teeth removed. Well, I knew that was happening, but there have been some complications with that, so I'm going to have to step out here for just a little while. I think you'll be in good hands with the rest of our staff. Hopefully, I'll make it back before our final session is completely over, but we'll get going. You got a short break, 5-minute break at 2 o'clock. We'll get going with our final session of the day. Then after that, there will be the opportunity, the final general session of the day. The board of directors and anyone else who wants to eavesdrop will be having a board training session down the hall here later after our final session. And then this evening, folks, if you're already registered and want to join us over at the Payne Native American Center, please do. If you want to pop in, even though you might not be feasting with the rest of us, there should be room to shoehorn yourself in and observe the goings on. So thank you all, and we'll be back here in now 4 minutes.